the way I would talk to a platoon of SEALs would be very different than the way I would talk to a 60-year-old COPD patient. And COPD is like a lung disease from common in folks who smoke, who is in the hospital for the nth time, who wants to quit smoking and is frustrated and needs some guidance. That patient is a different population, and being able to have the clarity and intelligence to know that and to switch your language appropriately is so important to yield results. And that goes for everything. I mean, that's why blanket leadership tenets don't work. Guiding principles work, but you need to form it to your own style to achieve the results. And I think a lot of it starts with awareness, with mindfulness of your own emotions, of the emotions, the body language that others are telling you, because it gives you hints as to what they're feeling. And if you know what they're feeling, you understand where they're coming from, that perspective, you can disarm people by finding common ground and achieving results. Because most of the time, all people want good things. They just disagree on how to achieve that.
Yeah, this I'm gonna give you a copy of this new book I wrote, and you're gonna be like, oh, cool. I'm glad we talked about everything that's in that book today. so much of this stuff is exactly what I talk about. One of the things I talk about there is, modulating, how you have to modulate your leadership principles, and how, you can't use the same tool with one person the same way you use that same tool with a different person, the same way you use it with someone else. You have to understand who you're dealing with and figure out how much of that specific tool to apply, if you can even use that tool, because different people respond differently to different things.
Absolutely. And you know what? I wish, I'm going to admit I have not read any of your books, but I've learned from watching you, from watching Leif, from watching other leaders, Scott, who is my next OIC, and mentors along the road, and making mistakes. All these tried and true lessons, I've been fortunate to make those mistakes and learn from them. And, I wish I had a book like that to teach me, but maybe it wouldn't have been effective. Maybe it requires a little bit of suffering through those mistakes to really hit home.
There's certain things that you can learn from a book. There's certain things you can't. One thing that's nice is for people that give me feedback on these books, give Leif feedback on these books, is if they have a little bit of context, man, you look at them and you go, every single person that reads one of these books goes, I wish I would have had this book. And you know what I respond with? I wish I had it too. I wish I didn't have to learn these lessons the hard way. But sometimes that's the way you're going to learn them.
But sometimes, it's not like anything we've talked about today is super novel that people haven't heard. There's a right time and a right place to hear lessons and advice. And sometimes I'm certain a lot of the lessons I follow and guiding principles I live by every day, serving with humility, remembering the sacrifices of others, respecting everyone, not taking things for granted. Those were said to me as a kid. I just wasn't in the right frame of mind to receive those lessons. So I firmly believe that people need to be ready to be mentored and to be taught.
Well, that's what humility is all about, right? And that one of the things that I talk about is the one person that you can't turn into a good leader is the one that's not humble, because they're not listening to what you say and they're not accepting any guidance. And so you're not going to be able to get them to move in the right direction. They're just going to continue to suck as a leader. So you get into Harvard, and, I read that letter that I wrote. I know Leif wrote you letters. We all did everything we could to support you getting in. You got into Harvard, but then the Navy wasn't going to let you go. What happened?
That's right. I haven't thought about this in a long time.
Because this is why you owe me a 6-pack.
More than that. So when the instruction for the Seaman to Admiral program I was in was written, it didn't take into context the various programs that would be there to support medical school. And I can throw out a bunch of fancy language, but basically there were 3 avenues to go to medical school through the military. There was USIS, the Uniformed Services of Health Sciences.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
The military medical school. There was 2 routes to go to a civilian medical school. And one was basically a scholarship where they'd pay for school. And another one was they'd keep you active duty as an enlisted person, but you would have to pay your own tuition. Me, having already been in the Navy for 10 years, wanted to stay in the Navy for many reasons. One, I had already had a scholarship to Harvard, as well as generous financial aid that paid 100% of my tuition. So I didn't need the scholarship to pay for school. What I did need was the TRICARE benefits and the salary to support my growing family. Into the Navy, it's essentially the same cost, right? So my program, the Seaman Admiral program, did not take into consideration the program where you stay enlisted. And it wasn't because it wasn't a good route. It just wasn't considered because the time that the instruction was written, that enlisted program wasn't written. And I wanted to apply to that enlisted program, but was being told by my my superiors at the ROTC unit that I couldn't do it because of the instruction. And I am not a believer in circumventing the chain of command. And in this case, I let my he was a lieutenant, Proctor, let him know, I'd like to see if I can pursue this avenue in a parallel path and try and get approval for this. And the response I got was, well, good luck. And that's when I reached out to you and told you the situation. And you asked a civic officer who I still actually keep in touch with, because I remember he did not know who I was. But the very fact that we were both from the same brotherhood, from teams, that he went out of his way, and he was working, I think, in Bupers or some personnel command that had access to these types to the people that can make these types of decisions. And he was able to secure, or at least share this story of what I was going through to the right people. And once those right people heard the situation, it was like, well, that's easy, of course. It just wasn't considered because it's a clerical thing, not because it's not shouldn't be allowed. So once the right people heard the story, they're like, yeah, absolutely, we'll support you. And it wouldn't have been made possible if it wasn't for the support of the teams.
Yeah, that was awesome. And my role was just knowing who to call. And, I had, no power, but the people that and the relationships that you build over time is like, hey, guys, here's what's going on. And the guys that are in powerful positions or in the right position, in the right spot with the right pull can make things happen, and they do it for the right reasons. Why? Just like you said, it wasn't because it wasn't the right thing. It was absolutely the right thing to do. It's like, hey, we got an opportunity for a guy to go to Harvard Medical School and be able to support his family while he's doing that. Who could possibly think that's not a freaking awesome idea? And that's all it needed. It just needed a little light shed on it.
I'll always be indebted and grateful for the actions of those to go out on a limb and support me. And I think, like you said, it goes to show when you are in a position to be able to help someone and it's for the right reasons and it's done responsibly, you should do that. It's the right human thing to do, is to help others on their path.
Now, when you said going from the teams to USD and then from USD to medical school, you said that was a hard transition too, going to medical school. Was that? Am I catching that right? Did I hear that right?
It was not as hard of a transition as the teams to just civilian life in general.
Right.
I would say that was like the transitions, the teams to non-teams. Because you said it yourself, but I joined the Navy at 18 years old. I was completely indoctrinated into the military. And you like to think there's bubbles everywhere, right? Everyone lives in a bubble to a certain extent. And in the military, we like to pride ourselves in a plethora of wide-ranging experiences. But if you think, we like to compare ourselves to maybe civilians or people who don't have those opportunities to get those types of overseas experiences. But if you think for a second that you may not be in a bubble yourself just because you're in the military, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. I was in that bubble. And I quickly discovered that I was indoctrinated. And yes, I went to a very liberal arts college, and I may not have agreed with everything that was discussed, but you know what? Learning to respectfully voice my opinion and listen to others voice their opinions is so important to being a productive member of society. So I am so thankful that I was able to step outside of my bubble into the civilian world and see how operations are done on that side. And it just helped me be a more rounded person, a more rounded human being. And I'm so thankful. It's just that it was very painful because I was not ready for that transition. And I think a lot of veterans are not ready as well. And I think that's why a lot of times it's hard for veterans to transition from the military into civilian life.
How hard was Harvard Medical School for you?
It was hard. It was.
What does a day look like? What is a week? Either a day or a week. Like, what does that look like going to Harvard Medical School?
I mean, for me, it was juggling the demands of a growing family. Had my first child. My second child was born during medical school. My third child was born during internship. So you didn't get much sleep.
Dang.
And you just learn to optimize your day. Like, you can't make more hours in a day. And this is when I learned that becoming a morning person was a better way to optimize my day. So, and I am not a genius by any means. I consider myself very average physically, mentally. It's just that I feel that I can stick with the goals and have deferred gratification to help support me for my goals. That's it. Working hard is all I know I can do to make up for any advantages, natural or otherwise, that I don't have. So I do feel that I had to study more than the average student at Harvard Medical School, and there were some smart folks there. And on top of having personal responsibilities to being a father and a husband, those were challenging. So I learned that, hey, I need to wake up super early, study in my most optimum time, work out. And it was just learning these changes to optimize my life.
How early would you wake up?
In medical school, I was waking up around 3:30.
And then you maintained your workouts all the time?
No.
At what point, was that kind of one of the early things to go? Did you hang on to it as long as you could?
I lost it my first year, and I like, in your 20s, you can eat junk food, you can get away with all these things, you can work off any bad diet you have. As you get to your later 20s and your 30s, like, you can't do that. You have to eat well. And I was overweight in first year of med school, and there came a point like, I can't do this to myself. Like, this, maintaining my health is for my sanity, for my health, and I owe it. Like, I don't care if I'm super busy. I should be able to find a half hour, an hour in. So I would say towards my second and third. I mean, it was just that first year I lost sight of that. And then after that, bought a treadmill, bought weights in my little basement. So I had no reason not to work out. So then I was waking up super early, getting my workout in first thing in the morning, and then just trying to crush as much studying as I could in the morning hours. Because I knew once I came home from school, there's no work getting done for hours, because my son and my wife, I need to be there for them. And a lot of times I wasn't. I was not the best husband and father during those years.
And that's because you got an exam in 2 days, or you got a paper due, and you can't do it.
Yeah, I was not, I don't think, able to do that very well. I tried, but I think I could have done better.
At what point did you decide maybe going into space would be a good idea?
So we talk about accidents.